Welcome to our Biz Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Cuthbert, Creative Director at Baker Creative. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it. Welcome, Janet. Thank you so much for joining us on our podcast.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, explain to our audience what you do at ProMusica.
Well, my title, if you will, is CEO, and I think many people, in a traditional sense, think a CEO is, oversight, management, lots of responsibility in, the vision and the strategic planning, budgeting, fundraising, all of that. And all of those kind of components hold true to, most of my day-to-day. But I think what's kind of unique for me in my role at ProMusica is I work very closely with my artistic partner, our music director, David Dansmeyer, and also our creative partner, renowned violinist, Vadim Gluzman. The three of us really are a very strong team, and I play, I think, a really, important part in terms of thinking about the overall music planning, artistic planning for the organization. So I would just kind of add that, in addition to just general management of the orchestra, I feel really lucky that I also get to play, a significant part in the overall artistic vision of the orchestra.
So what got you started in this to begin with?
My background actually is in music. I call myself a recovering flutist or a former flutist. I, grew up in a musical family. I am very grateful that I, was exposed to music at a very early age. My mother is a professional pianist, so started on that instrument at a young age. But flute became my instrument, and that's what I did for, about 25 years of my life. I was a professional flute player and played with the Taipei Symphony Orchestra in my earlier years. So music's been in my DNA ever since I was little, and eventually, really became very interested in the idea of arts administration and arts management and what it takes to kind of run an arts organization. So I kind of pivoted from doing, a lot of performances on stage to working behind the scenes. And I found that I was able to make an impact in that capacity versus, being an active musician, and felt a really strong affinity for it. So long story short, I had a career change, and ProMusica had an opening to work as its operations and education manager. And I took a leap of faith and applied for that, and have been here now within the organization about 20 years. And it's really been a labor of love. And I feel grateful that I still get to be very involved with music each and every day as part of my job.
Do you still play music?
I very rarely do. I think, playing an instrument is like, playing a sport. If you stop practicing for a certain period of time, it's really hard to pick back up. I played a little bit during the pandemic kind of for myself, and, every now and then I'll give a random kind of lesson, but I'm not active, and I don't think anybody wants to hear me play now, so it's okay.
Oh, no. I know it's very competitive to get into the music scene, right? And to be on something like ProMusica. What do you have any advice for young people that are because again, there's a ton of competition.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit, what I experienced is, if you think about sort of, the orchestral world, and you think about the major symphonies that, Cleveland Orchestra, New York Phil, LA Phil, and even all the other medium, smaller size orchestras that are doing amazing work. There are very few spots available. A lot of orchestras are unionized, and so there is a tenure process, which makes the competition all the more challenging. And I think for me, I did the audition route and, the competitive route. And I think for me in my gut, that really wasn't for me. That wasn't what I wanted to really do. And so that's why I made the transition. And again, I knew I wanted to stay in music no matter what. I just had to find another path to do it. But there's so many incredibly young, bright, talented musicians that are, really trying to go on their musical journey path. And, I think the piece of advice I would give any young musician is make sure that what you're doing is following what you truly believe in. And don't be afraid if there's another calling to take a step forward in that path, because the music world at this point versus like even 15, 20 years ago has diversified so much. It's become, a market and an industry that isn't just about practice, 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 take the audition and then, teach. There's so many more ways to engage with music education, with music therapy. So for young people who may not feel like performance in the traditional sense is the way to go, I would say definitely, think about the other avenues that allow you to stay within, the realm, but, you can reach so many people in so many ways through music.
So tell me what it was like growing up in Taiwan.
Well, so I moved back to Taiwan when I was 7. So I was actually born here in the US, and our family moved back. Me and my brother, we were very little. And so if you asked me back then what it was like to move back to Taiwan, I would have said terrible.
Oh,
And, when you're 7 and you have your little group of friends and, you're kind of taken from one culture and thrown into a completely different culture across the ocean, it was scary. When we moved to Taiwan, it was in the early 80s and at a time in which the country was still pretty underdeveloped, and certainly not, the country that you think of today, which is a big contributor to the semiconductor, industry and all that. So it was really hard. I had to learn the language. My parents enrolled me and my brother in the American school because they really felt that they wanted us to have the opportunity to come back to the US after graduating from high school. So I'm always very grateful for that. And it kept many doors open for me. But now, as I think back on growing up there, I feel so lucky. I feel so lucky that I could grow up with my family, with my extended family, that I know the language, that, there's a part of me that's very culture oriented. And I think honestly helps me in my current role in terms of, a universal language that bonds and brings people together of all walks of life. And, so all my family's still there, so I get to visit, at least once a year. But it's become an incredible country. It's a beautiful country. It's in my blood. And, I struggled a little bit with my identity, I think, when I was at an earlier age, but now I just know that my experience is there and it really kind of helped frame and shape who I am today.
so you're first generation?
I am.
Me
Yes.
too. I am too.
Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah. My
know.
mother's from Spain, so it's different. It's different when you have two cultures coming together, and sometimes you feel like you have to pick one, but it doesn't have to be.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think when I was younger, that's really how I felt. Like I had to be a certain way to fit in a certain culture, and having to feel like you have to switch. But I feel at this point in my life, I just recognize that both cultures and both identities have helped shape who I am. And I really fully embrace that and appreciate it.
I totally get it.
Is your family still there, or are you?
Yeah, my
Yeah.
family in Spain is still there.
Okay.
Sometimes they'll come here, sometimes we go there, and it's super fun. I mean,
Okay.
what it's like when you get to go revisit everybody again and
Yeah.
that, and I don't know, it's nice to be able to share some things in America that they would never have over there and explain things, and they were
Yeah.
just like, "Whoa, what?"
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
I think because I grew up there and really kind of watched in many ways, politically, culturally, community wise, watched a lot of the country kind of grow and develop. Um, Having played with the Taipei Symphony as an adult and having gone back to live there as an adult also was really kind of fascinating, and interesting just to see how they do things, and to kind of come at sort of that community, and how the Taiwanese do things from an adult lens. So that was also really interesting for me.
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you see Pro Musica's role in Columbus today?
We're about to go into our 24-25 season, and this will be our 46th year. So we've been around for a while, and ProMusica is a chamber orchestra, which is different by definition in general, different from a symphony orchestra, where you have symphony orchestras, you often will see upwards of 70, 80 musicians on stage. And a chamber orchestra like our size, we generally have anywhere between, 35 to 40 musicians on stage. So the experience is very different, if you kind of look at the two. I would say, ProMusica and chamber orchestras generally are very much more intimate. And I think if you look at the musicians within a chamber orchestra, there's a different sense of like flexibility and agility that one has to bring, when you're part of a chamber orchestra. So I think Columbus is very lucky to have both ProMusica as a chamber orchestra and then so many other arts organizations, but certainly, we also have the Columbus Symphony.
Mhm.
And I think Columbus should really embrace the fact that they're two professional musical ensembles here. Not every major city in the United States has both a chamber orchestra and a symphony orchestra. So again, I think Columbus is lucky to have that. But in terms of what we do, we do incredible performances for sure, but we're also very, very committed to new music and developing and promoting new composers, American composers of today. We actually just commissioned and world premiered our 70th new work back in May. And that actually was with John Batiste, a name that I think many people will recognize.
Congratulations.
It's an incredible artist. And so, I think that is really, I think, a very special thing for the organization, but I think a special thing for this community is, really having us help move the needle in terms of what the future of orchestral music looks like. And we have a lot of fun along the way. We're on stage, we're behind the scenes at libraries and schools and in charter schools and retirement communities. We just want to make sure that we're doing our part to bring music to all walks of life here to our audiences and to our community, which is incredibly important to the organization.
So say someone has never been, right? What would surprise them if they came to one concert?
I think if one had never been, you'll come to the theater or come to whatever venue we're at. And I think that you'll find immediately that there's a warmth, and there's a connection. And that connection can be something that's felt, or that connection can be something that is heard through the music. I think that people will find it to be incredibly relaxed and casual in terms of just come as you are. There is zero expectation for anybody who comes to a ProMusica concert to feel like they have to come prepared. I think that most most everyone that comes to a concert and they've never been before leave feeling like, I really felt something. And that's joy, that's some kind of emotion. And that's what we want, right? You know, music is something different to everybody. You can like it, or you don't have to like everything. You don't have to follow the rules. But I think if you come, you'll find a sense of warmth, a sense of intimacy. I think it's really fun that because we are a smaller size and we play at the Southern Theater, which is much more intimate, you can see every movement and every facial expression of our musicians. You can see the sweat, you can see, you know, all of the energy that's happening on stage is very palpable, because the musicians bring it all. And it's kind of like maybe watching like your favorite sport game, like super close up. You know, you can really see the connection, and you can see, okay, you know, this person is, the quarterback is cueing and teeing something up for, I'm not a football person, but my husband is, and you can just see how the strategy and how it's all working, from a very close view. And I think that's a very similar experience to if you come to ProMusica.
So when you play the flute, just so people can understand, how does it make you feel when you play the flute?
When I played the flute, how did it make me feel?
Yeah.
When I played the flute within an orchestra, what I loved about it is I felt that I was a single person that was being part of something broader and bigger. And I knew that what I brought to the table, if you will, what I brought to each rehearsal, to each performance, it was my job to know where I needed to step forward, and I needed to know when it was my job to kind of step back to blend. And it's kind of a song and dance, I think, in general, for any orchestral player, is you're going to have moments when it's about you if you have an incredible solo or a very prominent part. But when you're one of 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, you really have to all be on the same page and on the same vision as what the music director, what the conductor is doing and leading. And that can be really, I think, very exciting, because I remember many moments when I would be playing and some other instrument or my colleagues were doing something amazing, and I'd be like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. And I was like, oh, I gotta focus. Yeah. And so it's like sensory overload, I think, a lot when you're on stage and again, like if you're an audience member, that's what we want you to feel. We want you to feel all the sensory emotions that are happening on stage, and to make a connection with people who are sitting right in front of you. Because if there's nobody in the audience, then what's the point?
Yeah.
Of playing? If there's nobody, sitting in the sports arena and you're playing a game, what's the point? It's a shared experience, that I don't think you can get by watching something on TV or listening, audio. This is a shared thing that I think is what makes, live performances so special.
So what's next for ProMusica?
What's next? Lots in store. I mean, the pandemic, we're coming out of, still kind of post-pandemic time, and we feel very lucky that we were able to stay super creative and innovative during that time. We did a lot of cool things, like we played in parking lots, and people, sat in their cars and watched the concert and honked their horns instead of, clapping. And but at the same time, we're still kind of emerging a little bit of the residual of that. And I say, the challenge is to kind of remain at the forefront of, why should people go to events? Why should people go to concerts? And everything that we just talked about, I think, holds so true, is if you come, you're part of something bigger and broader. And there are many memories that you can take away from being part of a shared experience with people. And so as we look forward, I think ProMusica is very, very intent on ensuring that those experiences are both innovative, interesting, engaging. We constantly ask ourselves, why should people come? you know, people have so many choices. And so we need to be, again, very intentional on what we're presenting on stage. So for example, for this coming year, we actually have 2 new commissions that we're going to add, including about a year from now, an incredible pianist, Aaron Deal. He's actually from Columbus and a big name now, and he's going to be doing a new piece with us called Rhapsody. And this piece was inspired by Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, and it's celebrating its 100th anniversary. So, you know, really looking at tying also the past to the present. How do we make, you know, music that has been around for 200-300 years and reimagine that for the modern day? I think that's something that we look at a lot. So as we plan our season, if you come to concerts, I think you're going to hear really the wonderful blend of the traditional and the new. And when you come to a concert, you're going to experience something that you might have never heard before, a composer you've never heard of, a piece that you might have heard of, you know, many times, but you never heard it in this particular way or this particular energy. And that's what I think we really bring to each and every concert is how do we remain true to who we are as a musical organization and true to our vision, but how do we ensure that audiences come away with something that is refreshed and part of something bigger?
So in such a tech-oriented world, culture for that matter, how do you fit into a space to have it be more of that blend when there's so much technology out there?
Do you mean like recordings and
Yeah.
that kind of thing? Yeah, I think, you know, technology can both be, you know, our friend because it can help push out our music to a lot of different people in a lot of different spaces, which is, I think, incredibly important, especially for the organization and any performing arts organization. But it's that fine balance of technology not overtaking sort of the essence of live performance. So I think we look at it as sort of a blend. You know, how do we use technology to enhance what we're doing? And that can be anything from, you know, kind of audio visual or using technology within, you know, a certain piece. A small example is a number of years ago, we had a new piece written by Peter Shickley. He actually just passed away, and it was called Thurber's Dogs. And as we know in Columbus, there's the organization Thurber House. So we had this, and the piece is about dogs, and who doesn't love dogs? We're a big dog family. So we had James Thurber's drawings, still drawings of dogs, and there was a storyline with each of his sketches, and we had a piece written about these dogs. And to kind of enhance it, again, going to your point about the visual and technology, we had partnered with OSU's animation and design department, and they animated the dogs. So we were playing this piece, and then the dogs were, you know, animated on the screen. And again, it's such a fine balance because you don't want that to overtake the music. You want it to complement it. So I think as we continue to kind of navigate and find these little gems and ways that we can use technology to enhance it, we should for sure be continuing to do that. So that's just kind of a small example of, I think, how technology can really kind of bolster what you're doing, but again, not overtake it. And, you know, I think access to people who maybe don't live in Columbus, or, you know, people who aren't sure about, you know, ProMusica, they want to kind of see a concert, you know, digitally. And I think that's all really very important too, especially this day and age. And so we're also trying to invest in ways that we can make sure that our product can be available to a broader audience, because that just certainly helps us, and it helps the genre too.
So from a business standpoint, being the CEO, I'm sure you engage with a lot of other women business owners. What kind of mistakes or missteps do you see them make?
I think we're all human. So I think no matter if you're a woman or whatever gender in a leadership management position, we're human at the very core, and humans make mistakes. That's if we don't think we do, then I think there's something wrong there. Because we learn from our mistakes, and I've learned from many mistakes, and I know I will continue to perhaps make future decisions that may not be the best in that moment. I'm not going to know that, but I can't hold myself to being perfect. That just is not, it's just not who I am. But I would say that I think what I really love about being in this space and being a female Asian American woman leading a pretty big nonprofit organization and having grown it, I feel very lucky now that there are more and more women in leadership roles, those who have helped pave the way. Those that are sort of in sort of the career trajectory that I'm on, some that are up and coming. And what I think we need to continue to do more of is to support and elevate those women. Because I know for myself, I would not be here today if I did not have that support of women, but also any kind of mentor who is in a leadership position. Those who can help develop my own voice as a leader, and to help guide and say, here are the things you should watch out for. Here are the mistakes that I made and I learned from, and I want to pass it on to the next generation. I think we need to have more of that. I think often there is a stigma of, women having to be perfect, and that's just not fair, and that's not right. So the more that we can do, and I truly believe this is to help the next generation of young women leaders, and to remember that there are those trailblazers, over the years that have broken ground so that women can be in these leadership positions. I think there's a little bit of a reckoning that we really should fully embrace and make sure that we're doing our part for the future. I think that's so incredibly important.
Well, then you avoid a lot of mistakes and a lot of heartache going forward, right? So
Yeah. And I think, being in leadership positions can be lonely. I think for me in my role, I have a board of trustees who's very supportive, but they are my board. They're my bosses. I have a wonderful staff and a wonderful team. But there are moments where, you do feel a little lonely because, there's certain things you can't say to your board or, this, that, and the other. And so I think in those moments, it's even more so important to remember who you can lean on. Otherwise, I think when you're, making decisions or being faced with challenging issues, kind of alone, it can be, I think, a risk if you don't have somebody that can be a thought partner to you. So I have to recognize there are times in my leadership role where, it is very lonely, but I have been even more conscious of building sort of a support group, to help in those moments. And I think we need to just be more open about there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's really important.
I totally agree. I mean, it's like it's hard enough. You got the stigma of being a woman, then you have to be a boss and you're not allowed to make a mistake. You're not allowed not to know. And it's like, but sometimes like something like COVID, who would have seen that coming? How are you going to know? I mean, hello.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, I feel very lucky. At the time, I didn't really think of it, but, I started at ProMusica. I worked in operations, work in education, and then there was an opportunity to become its executive director. And, I had no background. I did not go to business school. Could balance a checkbook, but that's kind of it. But there were people in the organization who somehow saw, something and gave me an opportunity and believed in me. And even though knowing I, was very young, I fell into the ED role at the age of 30. And that's having played flute for most of my life. But again, to the point of like, you grow as you learn as you grow. And that is very, very true for me and continues to be true moving forward. But yeah, I remember, in my earlier part of my career, it was really hard to feel like I could not even like speak my voice, but find my voice. Right. And so again, many mistakes made along the way, but it's helped me grow. And throughout the process, I just recognize that we need to be more open and outwardly supportive of the young women who, are coming up in these channels. It's again, I think important to me personally and professionally, for sure.
So knowing it can be hard to run a business, is there any way that you kind of decompress, because it's a lot coming at once? Any tips on that?
Anyone has any tips, let me know. So, I'm not sure I'm a very good, I don't know if I have good tips, but for me, I'm the kind of person that understands that out of chaos often comes clarity. So when things are chaotic, like they are a little bit now, everything's going on, there's a lot of issues. There's organizational challenges of growing, staying relevant, and then there's broader community issues, and then there's a lot of people to take care of, musicians, staff, audience. It's a lot. But I think so. One thing is I always have to just tell myself that, I should feel good that every day is different for me. Not one single day is the same. And that's for me how I operate. I think that is good. And yeah, it can be crazy, it can be messy, it can, but there will always be clarity that comes out of that. I think things need to get messy for things to kind of open up and say, okay, I see the broader picture. But in terms of decompressing, I think it's because of my training for so long as a flute player, again, like you could never stop practicing. If you wanted to be a professional musician, if you missed one day of practice, like you're already behind. And so I think a little bit that's in my DNA. It's not that I want to be a workaholic, but I just feel like it's ingrained in me. It's like, you have to keep pushing forward, What's hard is I have to recognize how far I'm pushing and other people's, where, not pushing people over their limits, or at least trying to help navigate that. But yeah, my husband says I don't decompress very well.
Guilty.
I do love just to sit in stillness. That's where I do find calm. And I can be sitting anywhere. I can be sitting on my patio, can be sitting, in a park. If I'm sitting in stillness, usually that's when I get a sense of like, I can let things go. Not a very fun answer, but
Real answer though. That's
the
a real
real answer. Yeah.
So when it's all said and done, what kind of legacy do you personally like to leave?
I think personally, I think it changes, right? I think if you had asked me this question maybe 5 years ago, I think I would have, at this moment in time, answered it a little bit differently. But I think for me at this very moment, if I think about what I would like to leave behind personally, it would be it would be to try to make as much of a difference in the lives of the young generation of leaders, and in particular in this arts space. I think that we're living in a very tenuous time where music and art are more important than ever. You know, if we think about some of the repertoire and music and art that was created hundreds of years ago, because there was war, there was tension, there was strife, you know, we have so many amazing masterpieces now that were born as a result of those times. And whatever they mean to people now is one thing, but I think as we look at our time now, music and art, you know, are gonna, they have to play a big part, because it's a way to unify. It's also a way to express. It is a way to collaborate. It's a way to use music and art to navigate, bring people together. And we need that now more than ever. And I don't think it will ever go away. And I hope it never goes away. I hope the fact that music and art are so critical to lives and community, that will never change. And my big hope is for the world to continue to embrace that. And with that, you need bright, talented, brave, courageous, passionate people to lead that space. And so without pinpointing it, I hope that whatever I'm doing now can help, you know, push that a little bit further down the road and continue to help and support the younger people who are looking at music and what it means to them and the people around them. Is, you know, we need creative people. We need creative people to be creative problem solvers. And so whatever I can do personally, you know, that's what I feel really strongly about.
That's great.
Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, I think, you know what? It's storytelling in a different form. You could have it's interesting. You could have like a crowd that's kind of cranky and someone starts singing and everybody joins in, and then the whole room, the whole energy is different.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you remember, you know, a couple examples, like during the pandemic, especially in New York City, when everybody was locked in their apartment, and every day at a certain point in time, somebody would start singing out their window and everybody would join in singing. And would that have ever happened? You know, and what that did for that particular community, and they looked forward to that every day. Like, that's just one small example. Another example, which, oh God, this brought me to tears. I'll try to shorten the story, but I have a friend slash colleague who has a young child and had to go to Nationwide Children's, and this child is fussy and, you know, already not feeling well, and could not get him to calm down. They could not get him to settle, and it's, you know, frustrating on everybody. And I go back to John Batiste because we just had him. So my friend, colleague, just was so desperate and just started playing, you know, John Batiste's recent album, because it was on his phone. And after played one song, and he immediately just calmed down.
Mhm.
And that was the key. And yeah, I mean, he's, you know, an infant baby, but there's something about music that, again, that affects people in a way that you just can't put into words. And my friend now says, whenever, you know, everything's fine now, which is great, but every time, you know, his child is fussy, just plays that one song and he just calms down. And it just, you know, really kind of, again, it really made me emotional, because it was also such a relief and such peace for my friend, in terms of finding the tools and and how to manage this. And so music just comes into your life, I think, at unexpected moments when you don't recognize you really need it. And I think that's special and why I love being in the space that I am.
Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast. I think you had a lot of great information to share. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it, and feel free to post any questions so we can be inspired by new content. Thanks for listening. If you're interested in learning more, visit our website at bakercreative.co.